This should be pretty.
Testing 1, 2. Good morning, everyone. We're a little bit behind schedule, so I'd like to get started. So everyone, please take your seats. And welcome to the April 19th session of the Science, Technology, and Energy Committee. To begin, I would like you all to rise and join Representative Parshall in our Pledge of Allegiance. All right, thank you. We are here today to pass judgment on the remaining bills before us for this year.
Only you were God, Jack.
Yes, that's true. So before we begin, I'd like to introduce a couple of substitutes that we have here this morning. Representative Laflamme, who was with us last Tuesday, is back again to substitute for Representative Pimentel. And Representative Kelly is here as well, and he is substituting for
Representative Vincent.
Representative Vincent. So welcome to you both. Glad to have you in ST&E. We hope to proceed fairly quickly through our list of bills here today. If, however, the discussions drag on to the point where we can't get through everything before 11:30, we will break at 11:30 for lunch. And then we will come back and finish the bills. So with that, I think we can begin. So I'm going to now open an executive session on Senate Bill 271. This is a bill relative to the purchase of output of, or relative to the Burgess Biopower facility. And the majority has decided that we are going to recess this executive session until 10 a.m. on Tuesday, April 26th. 10 a.m. on April 26th. So with that bill being in recess, or that executive session being in recess, we can now move on to the rest of our agenda. We're not necessarily going to be execing these bills in the order that they're listed in the scheduling notice. We may take them out of order, but we will get through them all eventually. So the first bill we're going to do is I'm going to open an exec session on Senate Bill 263, and I recognize Representative Platt for a motion.
Chair, Mr. Chair, I move to ITL Senate Bill 263.
The chair recognizes Representative White.
I second.
It has been moved and seconded that we judge Senate Bill 263 to be ITL. Is there any discussion? Representative Platt.
I would just support my motion by saying that this sort of thing can happen without government involvement at all.
A good point. Additional comments? Representative Sobsic.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While I do agree with Representative Platt that this thing could happen without government involvement, I think having our state government make a statement about wanting to have young people involved in some of these issues is also a very powerful statement. And if we just say, you know, you guys can just do this on your own, bear in mind, many of these young people are minors. It's not like they can organize and demand things on their own. They need some support, and they are the future of our state. I think there's no real big harm in passing this bill because we would just let them have a say at the table. We still have the final say on everything. So I don't understand the ITL here, but that's just my opinion.
Thank you. Further discussion on this bill? Representative Callie Pitt.
I will vote no on the ITL simply because we have experimented in my town with youth on the school board and found that their opinions and their insights are invaluable. And I look at some of the youth that have gone through there and now see them on the city council. So this, to me, this youth environmental corps or council is a training ground because let's face it, some of us are going to, and I'm going to speak for myself, have to drop out. We just can't do it anymore. And some of these people that are on these types of councils and youth forums are going to take our place. And I always think that organization with some rules and some ways of operation is much better than just an ad hoc committee.
Thank you. Representative Thomas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I looked at this bill carefully and was intrigued by it. But one of the key points that was made during the hearings, I won't say key points, but one of the key references that was made was to the education chair, Representative Ladd, who said that he was in full support of this bill and it would be good for education. And that intrigued me. So I asked Representative Ladd the other day what he thought of this bill, and he said, "What bill?" And I said, and I explained to him what the bill was. I said, "And you're a co-sponsor on it." He says, "That may be, but from what you described to the bill, it doesn't sound like something that would be all that beneficial." And perhaps someone called me a long time ago and asked me about it, and my name got put on here. I really didn't even realize my name was on there. He says he doesn't, and like was mentioned earlier, he didn't believe that this type of council needed to have government support. So after hearing Representative Ladd's comments on that, I decided that I would agree with the motion to IETL. It's something that's best left out of our legislation.
Okay, further comments on this legislation? Representative McGee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I recall, the youth who came to testify for us, they were quite impressive, and they answered every question, and they gave the reasoning behind the bill in terms of having their voices included in the conversations that we're having. So I disagree that it's not something government should be doing. I think it's one of the easy lifts that we have to enable this type of a council so that the youth can be present and involved. And as Representative Kelly Pitts alluded to, I think I mentioned it in the hearing, that a pipeline be set up so that those youth can learn how to interoperate with the government and how to get things done. I think there's nothing but upside to a bill like this, so I don't understand why we wouldn't support it.
Thank you. I would remind the members that we already have a youth advisory council. In fact, one of the young people who testified was a member of the youth advisory council. So it seems redundant to create yet another youth advisory council. And when I spoke to Representative Ladd about this bill, he mentioned that very fact. He said, "We already have a youth advisory council. We don't need another one." So is there any further discussion of this bill? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on the motion of ITL for Senate Bill 263.
Representative Thomas,
Yes.
Representative Harrington,
Yes.
Representative Notter,
Yes.
Representative Murner,
Yes.
Representative Platt votes yes, Representative Berejny,
Yes.
Representative Bernardi,
Yes.
Representative Cambrils. Not present? Okay. Representative Ploget,
Yes.
Representative White,
Yes.
Representative Somsich,
No.
Representative Kelly Pitts, Representative Mann,
No.
Representative Oxenham. Not present? Okay. Representative Lewicki,
Yes.
Representative Kelly, yes.
No.
Representative McGee,
No.
Representative McWilliams,
No.
Representative Cretion,
No.
Representative Laflamme,
No.
and Representative Paschal.
No.
And the chair.
Yes.
Eleven yay, nine no, nay, and 2 not present.
So by a vote of 11 to 9, the committee judges Senate Bill 263 to be inexpedient to legislate. So I will close the exec session on Senate Bill 263. And I would ask if there would be a minority report. And Representative Kelly Pitts will write the minority report. You have that for your green sheet? Okay.
Okay.
Okay, moving on. I will now open an exec session on Senate Bill 395. 395 is relative to the Broadband Matching Grant Initiative. And I will recognize Representative Lewicki for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move ought to pass as amended.
Okay, could you make a motion on the amendment itself?
I move that we pass the amendment.
Okay, it's been moved by Representative Lewicki that we pass the amendment to Senate Bill 395. Chair recognized Representative Murner.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move Amendment 2022-1624.
Lewicki moved that amendment, so you can second it. Is that correct?
I second it.
Right. Thank you very much.
Want to say, because we didn't say the number.
Okay, so I will speak to the amendment. Now, during the public hearing on this bill, which was submitted by Senator Khan, there was a somewhat ambiguously worded bill that tried to talk about how we might increase the deployment of wireless communications throughout the state. And there was a lot of ambiguity and a lot of vagueness in the bill. And it was suggested by some of the wireless vendors that we mimic what we're doing for broadband and create a wireless deployment initiative and grant fund. We already have a broadband deployment initiative and grant fund. So this bill creates a similar initiative and fund for wireless development. And in fact, the language of the bill pretty much copies or is a duplicate of the broadband deployment initiative and grant fund bill. It's the same basic language, although it affects a different part of statute and was changed to focus on wireless as opposed to broadband. Senator Khan was fine with this amendment, and there was no opposition to it when we discussed it. It was the basic idea of the amendment was discussed at the end of the public hearing. And so I have prepared this amendment to carry through on this effort. And that is the basics of the amendment. So is there any discussion on this amendment? Representative Harrington is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of questions. First, on the bottom of page 2, it talks about federal funds received by the state for the purpose of expanding or improving internet access or wireless conductivity shall be credited to the wireless deployment grant fund. Does that, how does that match up with the broadband one? Because you've got improving internet access generally talks about broadband. So is the money going to go to the wireless deployment fund or the broadband deployment fund for improving the internet?
That's a good question. And it was raised to me just this morning that the word shall on line 37 should probably be may. But there was no time to generate a new amendment in time for this session here this morning. So my recommendation is that we pass this amendment as is, and the Senate will probably, when they see that word shall instead of may, they will probably they will non-concur and ask for a committee of conference,
Okay.
and we'll fix that word in the committee of conference.
Okay, and a follow-up?
Follow up?
Okay, in the, just above that in the paragraph, it says, in addition to state appropriations, this bill does not, amendment does not appropriate any money. It just makes a depository available if and when money was appropriated, whether it's from the state or the federal government.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on this bill? Representative Callie Pitts.
I hate to be a big mouth, but I don't think we should wait for the Senate to possibly go to a committee, a conference. There's no guarantee that they will. They may see this and just let it go through. If we believe that this should be changed, we should change it. And if it's such a minor change, it can be changed and brought back next week if OLS can't get it done today.
Okay, that's a good point. Representative Lewicki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It still isn't clear to me whether we're doing an either or, where it's either internet or cell phone service, or whether it is two separate bins.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Representative Cretion.
Thank you. In the original bill, it mentions that a municipality is eligible to apply for a grant. Is that still accurate in this one? I only see grants for wireless providers.
So the bill sets up rulemaking, or requires rulemaking, by the Department of Business and Economic Affairs relative to grant application and distribution procedures. And it spells out several concepts for rule making by the Business and Economic Affairs Department. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but if you could look at the paragraphs on page 2, lines 5 through 15 or 16 to see if that answers your question.
Can I follow up?
Follow up?
I guess I'm just wondering whether a municipality can be the originator of such a, a petition for a project, or if it has to come from the provider.
Well, there's nothing in this legislation that would prohibit a municipality from applying for such a project, the way I read it. It doesn't specifically say that a municipality can initiate a project, but it doesn't say it can't. Representative McGee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Starting on line 27, that section Roman numeral 4 says the Department of Business and Economic Affairs shall not, as a condition of an award of grant money, impose any requirement, state regulation, or other term or condition of service that differs from the applicant's terms or conditions of service in its other service areas. So it's kind of implied that the applicant will be the utility or or the service provider, I guess.
The service provider, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but not the municipality. And
It could
to Representative Cretion's point, it sounds like it's written so that the applications being made are not being made directly by municipalities who might be interested in the grant money. So.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Representative Callie Pitts.
I guess, thank you for taking the question. I don't understand that because we, a couple of years ago, made it so that municipalities could initiate projects by reason of bonding. And why municipalities then could not apply for a grant rather than a bond, I don't know. And I think that should be clarified. It seemed to me obviously clear that in all the machinations about broadband and cell service, that we did clearly want municipalities to be able to make arrangements to obtain funds to initiate those projects. And if this should cut that out, and it's a different bill, but it does one overshadow the other, or does one go into conflict with the other? That I'd like to know.
Okay, we have a couple of folks who helped prepare this amendment here tonight. So I'm going to ask them to comment on this question of whether or not this bill excludes a municipality from applying for a grant, and if so, why? Ms. Weston? Thank you. Please let us know who you are.
Sure. Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Maura Weston. I'm here this morning representing AT&T, and I have with me Owen Smith, who is the president of AT&T for Northern New England. I'll take a stab at answering the question, and then I'll let Owen fill in the blanks. In the arena of wireless, we're talking about quite a different business model than we were with broadband. And yes, there is the opportunity for municipalities to bond, to deploy infrastructure in partnership with private providers. That's a very different initiative than this initiative. This is really the creation of a fund for wireless providers to apply for grants to deploy in areas where there is no mobile wireless coverage. And the reason why, and here I'll let Owen fill in, the reason why municipalities can't apply for these particular grants is that they don't have spectrum. So in a wireline world, they can partner with somebody, they can acquire fiber, and they can deploy. But that's a very different business model than the wireless world. And I'll let Owen, because he's smarter, take it from there.
Good morning, Owen Smith with AT&T. And I think Mara covered it pretty well. We have spent billions of dollars on spectrum, so we are using our spectrum that we have here in New Hampshire to deploy. As Mara stated, a municipality would not have that, and they would not have the ability to utilize that. With regular wireline broadband, they can partner with a Consolidated or a Comcast. That's not how it would work. And of course, we would work with the municipality of which we wanted to provide service or improve service on their permitting process. So that's how that would work.
Okay, so just to clarify, to make sure I understand this 100%, you're saying that municipalities can't apply because municipalities don't have any spectrum to use to develop wireless service. Okay, thank you. Representative Harrington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Another thing to think about is I think was just alluded to, is that broadband is over a wire, which is a fixed from point A to point B. If you put up a cell tower in town A, it's also going to be broadcasting into maybe town B, town D, town C, who knows where. And it's not practical to try to say one town's going to have jurisdiction over other towns' cell service. And let's be honest, we really don't want municipalities getting in the business of being telephone companies because they don't know how to do it. And most places where attempts like that have been tried, they get screwed up completely. Let's leave the experts do what they're good at. And the towns can help with coordinating through their permitting process. But you really can't have a wireless set up by a town because wireless doesn't know town boundaries. It doesn't stop at the town line.
Thank you, Representative Somsich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for coming and taking our question here. Let me ask you this. Why does a for-profit business like yours need a grant to do these things?
So I was here a week ago and got into that a little bit, and I'll speak for AT&T, which is a for-profit private company who has spent over the last 3 years $120 million on our network here in New Hampshire. A lot to do with FirstNet, which is the public safety network that we built. When all is said and done, it works for our commercial customers as well. And even with that level of investment, there are places that still don't have adequate cell coverage. And prior to FirstNet, there was no business case to go into an area, many areas, and it's many areas that we're talking about in New Hampshire and elsewhere that still need the coverage. There's no return on investment. We get X amount of money for our budget every year, and it's prioritized. And a town like what was the town we used? Nelson. A town like Nelson just isn't a high enough priority for AT&T to spend its own capital when we need to improve coverage, maybe along 93 or in Manchester because of capacity. It's not that we don't want to, but we go through this prioritization. So I don't know if that answers your question. With FirstNet, that went out the window. It didn't matter on an ROI. We committed to building 34 sites here in New Hampshire and a lot of other ones, and we did it regardless.
Follow up?
Yeah, well, exactly to the point that you're talking about. I understand that in some areas they're not as profitable because they're so far away or remote or difficult to get to. But we previously had a bill we were discussing about the carrier of last resort for fixed telephone lines. And the argument was there is enough wireless options for these people to go to, and that's why we don't need that anymore. But it seems to me what you're saying is that you're not obligated to serve those people necessarily if it's not financially viable.
That's true. We aren't obligated. I will say that we have 97% of the population covered with wireless, but that doesn't help a little town like Lisbon or some of the other towns that would like to have coverage. So again, I think this is a vehicle to help get that coverage in those areas. We're going to go and we're going to improve the coverage in Manchester and along 93, just because that's what competition does. And but some of these smaller areas are not going to get the attention within the time frame that I think we're looking at.
Thank you. Representative Platt has a question.
Yes. If I were here during the public hearing, I could have asked the question, but I wasn't, so I'm doing it now with your permission. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking the question. I view this as sort of akin to the rural electric cooperative model when in the 30s when electricity was extended, but instead of a government entity, it's using the private entity instead. It's the same model. Is that correct?
Pretty much.
Yes. And would you have a level of penetration which you can cover profitably, so that that's a benchmark when you go in asking for grants, that you blow that and here's what you need essentially to at least break even?
We won't break even. We have operating costs that are associated with a site that we build in one of these areas that will be for the life of our term there, 20 years, 30 years plus. And so there's a huge operating expense. What this does is help us with a capital investment, which again, would love to go to Lisbon, but in the scheme of things in priority, it's not going to happen for who knows when.
Representative Cretion. You had your hand up? No. Representative McGee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. Mike, it's right here. When you talk about the various small places that are underserved, do you have a plan around how you would be applying for the money? Because I think the concern that I hear from Representative Somsich and others is that the places that are least well served may be the very last people to be served. So the question would be, is there any plan for going after this money in order to take those places in the state and bring them up where they need to be? And, are there way more than there's money available, or does it seem like this grant program is going to actually help New Hampshire solve for all of its gaps?
So I think this bill will help significantly towards, and I think I said this last week, I'm not going to sit here and say that any provider is going to get 100% of the state of New Hampshire or any other state covered.
Mm-hmm.
It's just nearly impossible to do. But, we can get a lot closer to 100%. I think we're, high 80s geographically covered. So I think this can really help. Is there a plan in place? Has AT&T put a plan in place for this funding? We have worked with other municipalities and other states, Indian tribes, and have done a couple of these programs where we have received grants and have built a tower on an Indian reservation in Nevada. We're in the very early stages. So very much like everybody here, we're not sure how this will work. The devil's in the details, and we are anxious to see what the BEA puts together, and we'll work to help make that happen.
Representative Callie Pitts.
I've been here long enough to see grants that are applied for go awry. That we're going to, quote unquote, do the last mile, and we don't. And it sounds to me that even with this particular federal grant, we won't. What I'm asking you is when this grant comes out, or is, as with every federal grant, there are stipulations, things that you must do. Can the state add any stipulations to that grant? In other words, I'll say Nelson, and I'm going to plead ignorant. I don't even know where Nelson is. I'm going to be honest. But if they have no service and it is not business-wise a good investment to invest in Nelson, is there any way that the state or the federal government can ensure that that particular area gets served?
So I think the way the process will work, and I think the BEA needs to work all of this out, and we would like to work with them on that. But we would say, you know, we would like to go to Nelson and build a cell site and, you know, cover the area. And I think that would start us with going to the town of Nelson and proposing to build a cell site, going through their permitting process, which would have us show our existing coverage, the proposed coverage. Let's say that they would approve it based on our presentation and all the environmental stuff and so forth that goes through it, which takes sometimes a year or two. Then we would go back to the BEA and say, here we go. So we've got the permit to build it.
So can I follow up?
Yes, follow up.
So now we do have a process to quasi ensure that different towns and different areas, by going through the BEA, can get served. Thank you.
I would like to add, Representative Pitts, I direct you to 12065 Roman 2, which says very clearly, eligible projects shall provide wireless infrastructure in areas unserved by or lacking consistent mobile wireless coverage. And that is in the establishment of the initiative itself. And then there is a rulemaking section that follows. And we, again, look forward to working with BEA to ensure those areas are prioritized.
Thank you.
Further discussion, Representative Lewicki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. I still have a question as to whether this is a single pot of money that covers both fiber and cell service, or whether we are talking about two separate entities.
So it's two separate entities. It would be a separate fund for mobile wireless, which includes connectivity through the internet. But this would be a mobile wireless 4G LTE, 5G, which is not only a voice service, but it's a data service. That's where the internet comes in.
Follow up?
This question still is, if Nelson gets a cell tower, does that mean that some other town, Roxbury, does not get fiber?
No, not at all.
Additional Representative Partial.
Thank you, Chair. Now, my understanding is that there are several competitors in all of these areas. It's not just AT&T that is they're building towers. And so that would potentially mean that even if AT&T were to come in and work with Nelson to develop cell tower technology in Nelson, if I'm a US Cellular or a Verizon customer, I'm still going to suffer from lack of service unless I'm calling 911. Is that true?
Correct.
Would you say that to some degree then this is perhaps a badly needed subsidy, but a subsidy that would allow you to divert other funding to rolling out 5G technology along the 90 corridor, Manchester, places that where you can more profitably put your resources, where this would potentially underserve those could potentially serve those other underserved areas.
Before
Boy,
you,
that's a hard question.
Before you answer that question, I would like to remind the members that we have an amendment before us, and your questions should be about the amendment, not about the overall subject that the bill addresses.
May I rephrase my question then?
You may rephrase your question.
That's because I do think the amendment does some distance in covering my concern. But I still am concerned that even with the amendment, the one line about serving, targeting underserved areas, still with that amendment there and with that money available, that will mean that you can potentially reallot resources to other more profitable areas within your company.
So I think that's up to the BEA to help manage. I think we're looking at the areas that need the most help. And I know this area hooks it around 93 is an issue for some providers. It's not for us. I don't think this grant fund is going to solve all of New Hampshire's problems, and there's no guarantee that any of these, Nelson will get service. But I believe this is to truly help in areas like Nelson to get cell service.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion, Representative Brezhny, did you have a question? Remember, it's a question about the amendment only.
It wasn't a question, it was just a comment to what Representative McGee asked about having a process, or I believe, and on page 2, line 14, it says establishment of a process that promotes wireless connectivity statewide. So I assume that will be something that the BEA does to figure out which towns should have or should be encouraged to get these grants.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to thank the two of you for answering our questions. I think you cleared up a lot of ambiguity.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you could just turn off that microphone there. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. So seeing no further Representative Cretion has a last minute question.
Sorry, I do have another question. I was just hoping you could clarify for me. So Roman 3 on page 1 says eligible projects shall be evaluated as part of a competitive process. Can you just clarify who is going to be doing that evaluation? Is it the BEA? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments? Representative Kelly?
Yeah, I don't want to step on any toes, so I'll keep it brief. But I was just comparing this against the broadband initiative package that we passed last year. There are two notable things missing from this bill that were included in the last year's legislation, and that were a 50% cap on costs. So total cost of the project being 50% supplied by the broadband provider. In this case, it would be a wireless provider, and then the second one being a stipulation that eligible costs shall not include operating expenses or recurring costs. I just wanted to point that out, seeing that I had both bills in front of me.
Okay, thank you. Representative Laflamme, did you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my comment would have been for the representative from AT&T, but I'll put it out there anyway. There are areas of the state, up in my neck of the woods, where major corridors, U.S. Route 2, U.S. Route 3, New Hampshire Route 16, heavily traveled roads, which do not have access to cell phone service. You're driving along and all of a sudden, that's it. You don't have cell phone service anymore. And I was curious if this program would enable carriers such as AT&T to or encourage them to increase cell phone service even in places that are unincorporated and do not have a municipal structure.
I'll take a stab at answering that question since you weren't here for the public hearing. The whole purpose of this grant initiative is we know the federal government is going to be providing millions, possibly even tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars for broadband expansion and potentially wireless expansion. And this fund is a place for some of those federal funds to reside, to be deposited in. And the goal would be to expand wireless coverage wherever it's needed. So the answer to your question is yes. That's part of what this is all about.
Thank you.
Okay, further questions? Representative Partial.
Thank you, Chair. Has it been discussed, to your knowledge, any potential of sending this to an interim study?
That hadn't come up in any of the discussions I've had, no.
I feel, I
Go
feel
ahead.
an urgency for a bill to address some of these areas. And I think this amendment goes a long ways in answering some of my concerns. But I still don't know if it really gives me all the solace I would like to go forward and vote for this bill. I really am still kind of on the fence, I'll be very honest.
Okay, thank you. Representative Platt.
I, on the other hand, think this is critically necessary to get federal funds when they come, instead of missing them. And with respect to 50%, I don't know if that's applicable to a wireless. I don't know that the cost recovery needs to be higher than that in some cases. So it just, I wouldn't want to hamstring. Let the process take place.
Representative Harrington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. May I suggest this? We seem to have some legitimate concerns here, but we also have the issue of who knows when the big federal dump truck's going to load up and say, do you want your money? And if we have no place to put it, they're just going to go to Maine. So maybe this committee could have an unofficial committee that gets together with this and then presents some changes to the Senate when it goes there, because it will have to go back to the Senate. And that'll give us an opportunity to address what I think are some legitimate concerns, and also not delay for another year with the possibility of losing federal funds. So that's a suggestion.
All right, that's an idea. So I have asked Kristen to obtain a new amendment that changes the word shall to the word may on, I forget, line, what, 27? 37 on page 2. However, to follow Representative Harrington's suggestion of just a moment ago, we could pass this amendment and then ask the Senate to non-concur, form a committee of conference, and address the issue that Representative Harrington raised in a committee of conference. So I would like to get a sense of the committee of what you would prefer to do. We could either pass this amendment with the idea that it would go to a committee of conference, or wait for the new amendment, which changes the word shall to may. Representative Platt.
My druthers is to get the new amendment because it's cleaner, and you still may want to discuss with the Senate some changes.
Okay. Representative Berezny.
Would any of the changes that would be discussed in the committee of conference affect the grant, the receiving of the grant part? Because if it doesn't, then we can just pass this and have this implemented, and then next year make any small fixes to the implementation.
It shouldn't affect it at all. Shall or may simply means it must or it can. So it's a fairly simple change. Any further, Representative Callie-Pitts?
I would rather wait for the amendment that's coming rather than pass this amendment. And I thought what I heard you say, Representative Bose, was that when this goes back to the Senate, there may be room for testimony there as well.
Well, what will happen, whether we pass this amendment or a new amendment that changes the word shall to may, is that it will go back to the Senate, and the Senate will have to vote to concur or to non-concur, or to non-concur and request a committee of conference. So if we communicate with the Senate that we want a committee of conference, then we can get one. I'm sure they'll go along with that. But the first step would be to pass an amendment. And my sense is that the committee does not want to pass this amendment because it has one word in it that's wrong. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to call the roll. I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll and ask everybody in the committee to vote no. to reject this amendment. And then I will recess this executive session until Kristen informs us that she has a new amendment that fixes that one word. Then we will resume this executive session and pass that amendment. So if that seems acceptable to everyone, then I will ask the clerk to call the roll on the adoption of the amendment, whose number I don't have in front of me.
1624H.
1624H, and I urge everyone to vote no.
Representative Thomas.
No.
Harrington. Mr.
No.
Representative Harrington. Representative Nodder.
No.
Representative Murner.
No.
Representative Platt votes no. Representative Berejny.
No.
Representative Bernardi.
No.
Representative Ploget.
No.
Representative White.
No.
Representative Somsich.
No.
Representative Kelly Pitts.
No.
Representative Mann. Representative Oxenham. Not here, right. Representative Lewicki.
No.
Representative Kelly.
No.
Representative McGee.
No.
Representative McWilliams.
No.
Representative Creechin.
No.
Representative Laflamme.
No.
Representative Paschal.
No.
And the chair.
No.
Okay, that's 20 voting no, no yeses, and two absent.
Okay, by a vote of 20 to nothing, then we have rejected amendment number 1624H. And we will await the arrival of a new amendment, which we don't know when that'll happen. So I will recess this executive session on House Bill 395, or Senate Bill 395, until such time as we get that new amendment. So that gives us a new opportunity to open an executive session on Senate Bill 262. And the chair recognizes Representative McGee.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I passed out an amendment which is 2022-1631H. And that amendment is, I would like to put that amendment up for ought to pass.
So do you have a motion?
A motion of ought to pass on amendment 2022-1631.
Thank you.
Oh, to adopt. Do I have to say adopt?
Second. Second, then.
Representative McGee has moved that we adopt amendment 1631H. Representative Thomas is recognized.
Second.
Okay.
Representative Thomas seconds the motion. Representative McGee, would you like to discuss the amendment?
Yes, thank you. We've had conversations outside of our committee room amongst ourselves and with other interested stakeholders about what we were attempting to accomplish with 262 and where sort of the pain points were within our own committee about disagreements about how far we wanted to go and what we wanted to pass within that original bill. And so what the amendment does is it removes sections of the bill 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then renumbers items 6 through 9 to be 1 through 4. And then this amendment shows the changes in the language, what was formerly section 6. So I know that's kind of confusing, but the chairman and I worked together to make sure that the language here was acceptable to basically all the stakeholders who had been involved in terms of what we can get past at this point. So what is preserved is the ability to be added to group net metering with a custom generator. So that language is preserved. And the interconnection piece that was a cause for significant concern because there isn't really a process for consistent application of the interconnection fees was preserved. And I have to look at the bill to tell you what else is in there. I don't know, Mr. Chairman, if you have anything you want to add.
While you're looking that up, I will just point out that the amended language in the new section 1 about group host requirements is a language that we came up with the help of the Department of Energy.
Right.
And basically what it fixes is a problem such as the one exists in Londonderry, where their fire station has solar panels on the roof or somewhere nearby, and they net meter that their excess power because of the way the existing statute is worded. They cannot become part of a municipal group net metering group.
Mine's not.
So this language fixes that problem so that Londonderry's fire station could now become part of a municipal group net metering group. And the way the language is worded, those are the only persons or the only entities that that could do so. So that is the explanation for the amendment. Representative McGee.
I don't have the full version of 262 here. There's a page missing, so I can't refer to the other sections. I'm sorry.
So the other sections of the bill that were removed were a variety of sections that expanded net metering, changed limits for net metering, et cetera. And those sections have all been deleted by this amendment. Is there any, go ahead, Representative.
I was just going to say, Representative Callie Pitts just secured me a copy from Donna Gamache. So the pieces that are preserved are the group host requirements, which was what you just mentioned, plus the distributed energy resources findings section, which was number 7. And then under 8, it's the hosting capacity maps that will be required by the utilities online. And then the interconnection. So those are the sections that the bill will contain. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, is there any further discussion on the amendment to Senate Bill 262? Seeing none.
Mr. Chairman, excuse me.
Representative Harrington.
Thank you. Representative McGee, what was were you referring to I've got a 1 page, 1 section. Is there something I'm missing? Replaces the entire bill with this, correct?
Well, it amends the bill by deleting sections 1 through 5 and renumbering the original sections 6 through 10 to read as 1 through 5. So that is how our OLS resource said it was the easiest way to do it. So that's why I was explaining to you which sections in the original bill were going to be maintained. I also wanted him to put all the language in so we could see it all in front of us, but this is the way they do it. So
Just to follow up. So if I'm correct, then
follow up.
6 through, where are we going here? 6 through 10 stay as written, except for the changes in bold on the one piece.
Correct.
Okay, now I got it. Thank
Yep.
you.
Okay, is that clear to everybody? Exactly what we're doing here. Okay, seeing no further discussion, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on the question of the adoption of Amendment 1631H. Mr. Clerk.
Okay, Representative Thomas,
Yes.
Representative Harrington,
Yes.
Representative Notter,
Yes.
Representative Murner,
Yes.
Representative Plett votes yes, Representative Berejny,
Yes.
Representative Bernardi,
Yes.
Representative Cambrils, not here, Representative Ploget,
Yes.
Representative White,
Yes.
Representative Samsich,
Yes.
Representative Kelly Pitts,
Yes.
Representative Mann, Representative Oxenham, not here, Representative Lewicki,
Yes.
Representative Kelly,
Yes.
Representative McGee,
yes.
Representative McWilliams,
Yes.
Representative Creechin,
Yes.
Representative Laflamme,
Yes.
Representative Paschal,
Yes.
and the chair.
Yes.
That's 20 to 0 to 2. Two absent.
Okay, by a vote of 20 to 0, Amendment 1631H is adopted. The chair now recognizes Representative McGee for a motion.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion ought to pass on SB 262 as amended.
I'll second it.
Representative Callie Pitts seconds the motion of ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 262. Do we need any further discussion on this bill? Representative Callie Pitts, please turn off your mic. Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on the question of ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 262.
It'll just take me a second to get set up to do that. All right. Calling the roll for ought to pass as amendment for 262, Bill 262. Representative Thomas.
Yes.
Representative Harrington.
Yes.
Representative Notter.
Yes.
Representative Murner.
Yes.
Representative Platt votes yes. Representative Berejny.
Yes.
Representative Bernardi.
Yes.
Representative Cambrils. Not here. Representative Ploget.
Yes.
Representative White.
Yes.
Representative Somsich.
Yes.
Representative Kelly Pitts.
Yes.
Representative Min, not here. Yes, you are. Sorry. The wrong one marked off, absent. Representative Oxenham is not here. Representative Lewicki.
Yes.
Confirmed. Representative Mann, your vote was yes? Okay. Representative Lewicki voted yes. Representative Kelly.
Yes.
Representative McGee.
Yes.
Representative McWilliams.
Yes.
Representative Cretion. Representative Laflamme.
Yes.
Representative Partial.
Yes.
And the chair.
Yes.
That's a vote of 20-0-2. 20 yes, 0 no, and 2 absent.
Okay, by a vote of 20 to nothing, Senate Bill 262 is judged ought to pass as amended. Without objection, it'll go on the consent calendar. And Representative McGee, I'll need a committee report by noon tomorrow. All right, so with that, we'll close the executive session on Senate Bill 262. And we will open an exec session on Senate Bill 429 FN. This is relative to the Site Evaluation Committee. And 429, I recognize Representative Berejny for a motion.
I motion that we judge ought to pass on SB 429. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Notter is recognized.
I second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded that we judge Senate Bill 429 to be worthy of the motion of ought to pass. Is there any discussion? I will point out to everyone, just to jog your memory, that this bill came directly from the recommendations that were made by the Site Evaluation Committee Study Committee, which met last fall to determine if there were any improvements that could be made to the Site Evaluation Committee short term, while another study committee was formed to pass judgment on the long-term future of the Site Evaluation Committee. The bill is fairly long and complicated, makes quite a few changes to the existing Site Evaluation Committee, but all of these changes have been received positively by the existing members of the Site Evaluation Committee, by members of the Department of Environmental Services, by the Department of Energy, and to date, there's been little opposition to the changes suggested by this bill. Representative Harrington, who has served on the Site Evaluation Committee and was part of the study committee last fall that came up with these short-term recommendations, would like to comment on a few of them.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, it gives the committee more flexibility. I mean, this sounds a little silly, but we literally would spend sometimes hours trying to schedule the next Site Evaluation Committee hearing because you had 4 or 5 commissioners and a couple of directors in a room, all trying to work their schedules out, and it was really, really difficult to do. So this means this allows for designees. It lowers the amount of the quorum from 7 to 5, which just makes scheduling a lot easier. It was really difficult to explain to people why the next hearing would be 2.5 months away when they wanted it to be in 2.5 weeks. So this will give a lot more flexibility. It provides for a training for the site evaluation committee, which was never in place before. And to be quite honest, some of the people on that committee had no idea what the subject was as far as citing regulations, because it wasn't part of their regular job. It also allows for certificate monitoring and compliance, which was never had no funding in the past. So after a project was completed, if there was a concern over whether the certificate was being properly implemented, there was really no mechanism for follow-up on that. There was no funding for anyone to go out. And this would allow for funding, so the Department of Energy or Department of Environmental Services, whatever was appropriate, could send somebody out and say, we've got a complaint that you're not complying with the certificate, and make some evaluation as to whether that was or wasn't done. And it also increases the fees, basically with inflation. The last fees, I think, were 8 to 10 years ago before they were increased, and this just brings them a little bit more in line with that. So again, as the chairman said, this is a short-term fix, looking with the idea of the Department of Energy, whether we need to revise this completely, which would be the second step for this. It does impose fines for a violation, which again was an oversight in the past, and was very frustrating, especially to the general public involved, when they'd see something that they know wasn't in compliance with the certificate, and there was almost no mechanism for them to see that be stopped and be addressed. So those are the changes. I think they're improvements. Again, it's not the end of the world on these. We'll be looking at it with the bill we've already passed, with the idea of how does the Department of Energy fit into this, and do we need to look at this completely differently. But in the short term, we need these fixes.
Discussion on the motion to judge this bill ought to pass. Representative Sopsich.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I agree with Representative Harrington's description of what we're trying to do here and why we're doing it. I think the only issue of contention that came up in our caucus was about the fees structure, which struck us as being a little strange. This is on page 2, lines 25 through 30. And the first line is asking for a $1,200 per megawatt fee for the first 40 megawatts of, this was wind energy. And number 5 was $1,200 per megawatt for renewable energy generation facilities. All the other categories were in the range of $100 to $200, and these were $1,200, 10 times as much as the other fees. And I believe that Representative Oxenham was going to submit an amendment change to this bill, which would change the category number 5. I believe it's to $250, which seems more in line with what is listed here. So, I don't, since she is not here, I was going to inquire whether there is an amendment or not that she has submitted to the committee. Are you aware of that, Mr. Chairman?
I have seen no amendment, no. And it was explained to us by the Department of Energy that these numbers were arrived at many, many years ago based on the size of the projects. And all the amendment did was just adjust those numbers based on the same adjustments that were made to the other numbers in the fees.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I don't believe that that was explained to us how that formula should happen. For example, that a nuclear generation facility should only be charged $250. Certainly, that's a much more complicated facility. Is it by square foot? Is it by what is it by? I mean, that was not explained to us. We know that there is a formula being used, but nobody explained the formula here. And it still doesn't make sense to me that something 10 times as much for wind energy and other renewable energy generations in general should be 10 times as much almost as the others. It doesn't make any sense.
It's actually, it makes very good sense because it's it's per megawatt.
Yeah, but it's per megawatt for every facility, including the nuclear.
Right.
So,
and nuclear facilities are orders of magnitude greater in size,
of course,
than renewable generation. So the total application fee for a nuclear facility, although that would never come before the site evaluation committee, but
that was not the formula.
The total size would be the fee would be much, much greater
Yes.
for a large plant than for a small solar or wind facility. Representative Harrington.
Maybe one thing that would just help here if we just remember that, especially if when you're talking about the renewable energy facilities, the overwhelming majority of those facilities are not the site evaluation committee does not have jurisdiction over, because they're in the 2, 4, 5, 10 megawatt range. And there's no need to file an application with the site evaluation committee for under 30 megawatts unless the town or the municipality petitions and requests their help. So a lot of those smaller projects that we typically associate with renewable don't even require the site evaluation committee, so there wouldn't be any fee at all. Hopefully that helps a little.
Okay, any further discussion? Representative Callie Pitts.
I'd just like a clarification. One of the things we heard was that the site evaluation committee had a hard time getting a quorum, and that members often were unavailable, even to staff it. Is this site evaluation committee, it's just for clarification, are they going to be permanent members of the site evaluation committee that will be sitting regularly? Not once, you said once a year, maybe once every 3 years, doesn't, or you could have 10 petitions in 1 year. And will they be salaried employees? Just a clarification.
This legislation does not change the current structure of the site evaluation committee. It just modifies some of the legislative components that govern the committee's operation. Now, there is another bill that we passed that would create a study committee to look at the long-term future of the site evaluation committee, but that bill is a different effort from this bill, which is to fix some problems that are known to exist today to see if we can get the committee to work better.
Well, if I may follow up, this bill requires training, provides training, and reduces a quorum. So I'm wondering, we're going to invest in training, which to me would seem complicated, and we're going to reduce the quorum. Are these members, as stated, and you say there's no change, but there is a change, are they going to be the current members? Let's put it this way, the members who are sitting on the committee now.
Yes, they're the same members. This bill only requires fewer of them to constitute a quorum for a meeting. So there's no change there.
No change.
No. And the other point you raised was?
Well, we're going to do training. So
Training,
if they're
training.
the same members
So-
that are sitting on the committee, they would have been trained, I guess.
So training was part of the site evaluation committee statute. It was changed back in 2016 or 2017 to add training from the Department of Justice to make sure that new members of the committee fully understood the statute, their statutory obligations. This amendment adds additional training by the Department of Energy, which they have agreed to supply, on the technical aspects of the work of the site evaluation committee. So it's actually an improvement in the training aspect of the operation of the committee. All right, any further discussion on this question? Seeing none, I'd ask the clerk to call the roll on the motion of ought to pass on Senate Bill 429.
Representative Thomas.
Yes.
Representative Harrington.
Yes.
Representative Notter.
Yes.
Representative Murner.
Yes.
Representative Platt votes yes. Representative Berejny.
Yes.
Representative Bernardi.
Yes.
Representative Campbell's not here. Representative Ploget.
Yes.
Representative White.
Yes.
Representative Somsich.
Yes.
Representative Callie Pitts.
Yes.
Representative Mann. Representative Oxford, I'm not present. Representative Lewicki.
Yes.
Representative Kelly.
Yes.
Representative McGee.
Yes.
Representative McWilliams.
Yes.
Representative Cretion.
Yes.
Representative Lamb.
Yes.
Representative Paschal.
Yes.
And the chair.
Yes.
The vote is 20-0, 2 absent.
Okay, by a vote of 20 to nothing, this bill is judged to be ought to pass and without objection will be placed on the consent calendar. Seeing no objection, it will go onto the consent calendar. So with that, I'll close the public hearing on Senate Bill 429. And now I will call us out of recess for Senate Bill 395. And I will recognize Representative Lewicki for a motion to adopt the new amendment just prepared for us, Amendment 1639H. Representative Lewicki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we adopt Amendment 2022-1639H.
Representative Murner is recognized.
I'll second that motion.
Moved and seconded that we adopt Amendment 1639H. So if you look on page 2, down at line 37, the word shall has been changed to may. That is the only change in this amendment. Is there any further discussion of this issue and this amendment? Seeing none, I would ask the clerk to call the roll on the question of the adoption of the amendment 1639H.
And I shall do so in a moment.
And the clerk will do so in a moment.
The May. Okay, this is
Senate Bill 395.
2022-1639H.
While the clerk is continuing to get ready for this, I will point out to everyone that we will take a 5-minute bio break after the conclusion of this public hearing, this executive session.
All right, this is adoption of 2022-1639H for House Bill 395. Representative Thomas.
Yes.
Representative Harrington.
Yes.
Representative Notter.
Yes.
Representative Murner.
Yes.
Representative Platt votes yes. Representative Berejny.
Yes.
Representative Bernardi.
Yes.
Representative Cambrils. They're not here. Right. Representative Ploget.
Yes.
Representative White.
Yes.
Representative Somsich.
Yes.
Representative Kelly Pitts.
Yes.
Representative Mann. Representative Oxenden not here. Representative Lewicki.
Yes.
Representative Kelly.
Yes.
Representative McGee.
Yes.
Representative McWilliams.
Yes.
Representative Creechin.
Yes.
Representative Laflamme.
Yes.
Representative Partial.
Yes.
And the chair.
Yes.
The vote is 20-0 to 2. 20-0, no, 2 absent.
Okay, by a vote of 20-0, the amendment to Senate Bill 395 is adopted. I recognize Representative Lewicki for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 395.
Representative Murner is recognized.
I'll second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded that we judge Senate Bill 395 to be ought to pass as amended by amendment number 1639H. And I will recognize the clerk to call the roll as soon as he is ready.
Wow.
And while he is preparing himself, I will discuss what we're going to do after we come back from our break. We have 3 bills left to do after we come back from our break. We'll take up Senate Bill 265 first. Then we'll take up Senate Bill 448. And the last bill will be Senate Bill 321. I had originally planned to take up Senate Bill 321 sooner, but was informed as we were sitting here this morning that there was an error on page 14 of page 2 of the amendment that had been prepared. I sent this amendment to everyone on the committee a couple of days ago. Turns out that on page 14, or on line 14 on page 2, the word commission should be department. So we're waiting on a new amendment that fixes that one word. And when we get that, we will be able to move on to Senate Bill 321.
I've run out of sheets. Looks good.
Kristen, is Kristen here? Kristen, can you help us with
I've got more in here.
Oh, you do? Okay. We're good. Sorry.
A bit of shuffling here. Sorry about that.
All right. While he continues his preparations here, I'm going to recognize Representative Thomas, who has a question for members of the committee about next Tuesday, April 26th.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have been invited by Eversource to tour their control facility in Manchester in the afternoon of Tuesday. We, as you've heard, we've scheduled, we've recessed the bill for the morning, but we're pretty sure we'll be done by noon. So I'd like to hear if there's any appetite for the committee to leave from here and go take a tour at the Manchester Eversource control facility. Or I'm not sure if that's the exact word for it, but it's their their up-to-date control room that they'll talk about how they control the area here.
Representative Notter?
I accept the invitation. Thank you.
Let's have a show of hands. How many people could attend this event next Tuesday afternoon? Looks like a reasonable number.
I am told that what will happen is that we'll go in there and we will have lunch first and then take the tour.
Okay.
Yes, I did work for Eversource Public Service New Hampshire for 23 years, but that ended in 1990. That's 100 years ago now. And the facilities that they have now did not exist. They had a separate transmission operating, a remote for controlling transmission up on next to Brook Street. I forget the name now, but that's gone, and they have it now in their Eversource headquarters, but in distribution as well now.
Representative Platt, they have improved the outhouse though.
So Representative Platt, did you just admit that you're over 100 years old?
Yes. Just ask my great grandkids.
Congratulations on your longevity.
Okay.
All right, are we ready to call the roll on the question of ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 395?
Yes, we are. And
Then please do so.
Yes. This is ought to pass as amendment. Representative Thomas.
Yes.
Representative Harrington.
Yes.
Representative Notter.
Yes.
Representative Murner.
Yes.
Representative Platt votes yes. Representative Berejny.
Yes.
Representative Bernardi.
Yes.
Representative Cambrils is not present. Representative Ploget.
Yes.
Representative White.
Yes.
Representative Somsich.
Yes.
Representative Kelly Pitts.
Yes.
Representative Mann. Representative Lewicki.
Yes.
Representative Vincent.
Yes.
Not Kelly. Yeah, Representative Kelly. Forgive me. Yes. Representative McGee.
Yes.
Representative McWilliams.
Yes.
Representative Cretion.
Yes.
Representative Laflamme.
Yes.
Representative Partial.
Yes.
And the chair.
Yes.
That's the vote is 20-0, two absent.
Okay, by a vote of 20-0, Senate Bill 395 is ought to pass as amended. Without objection, we'll put it on the consent calendar. Seeing no objections, it will go on the consent calendar. And I thank you all. That's 3 bills this morning that we have sent to the consent calendar. The Speaker of the House and the House Clerk will be very happy, be very pleased with us. Okay, so we'll close the exec session on 395, and we will take a 5-minute bio break. Please return to your seats at 10:30 so that we can finish up the 3 bills we still have to do. Thank you.
Woo! I'm not taking this job next year.
Oh, by the way. Okay, let's get back in our seats, everyone, so we can restart our activity here. Okay, so welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a productive break. I won't say enjoyable, but productive. I'd like to point out that in the discussion of Senate Bill 262 that we had a few minutes ago, I talked about a Londonderry fire station that had solar panels on it. That was hypothetical. That wasn't about something that actually exists today, although it could exist in the future. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was clear on that so that they understood what we were doing. All right, so now let's move on. Oh, and by the way, we have a new amendment for Senate Bill 321. It's Amendment 1641H. It's being sent around the table, and we will work on that shortly. But before we do that, let's do Senate Bill 265. So I'll open an exec session on Senate Bill 265, which is a bill relative to the aggregation of electric customers by county. And I'll recognize Representative Cambrills for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to make a motion to OTP Senate Bill 265.
Representative Cambrills moves the adoption of OTP for Senate Bill 265. Representative Ploget is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll second the OTP of Senate Bill 265.
It's been moved and seconded then that we judge Senate Bill 265 to be ought to pass. Do we have any discussion of this bill? Essentially, this bill adds counties to the list of entities that can form community aggregations. It's a relatively straightforward and simple bill. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, it looks like maybe we could ask the clerk to call the roll on the motion of ought to pass on Senate Bill 265.
Shall, as soon as I put the substitutes in so I don't screw it up.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clerk.
On 265, ought to pass. Representative Thomas.
Yes.
Representative Harrington.
Yes.
Representative Nodder.
Yes.
Representative Murner.
Yes.
Representative Platt votes yes. Representative Berejny.
Yes.
Representative Bernardi.
Yes.
Representative Cambrills.
Yes.
Representative Ploget.
Yes.
Representative White.
Yes.
Representative Somsich. I'll come back. Representative Kelly Pitts.
Yes.
Representative Mann. Representative Oxenham. Not here. Representative Lewicki.
Yes.
Representative Kelly.
Yes.
Representative McGee.
Yes.
Representative McWilliams.
Yes.
Representative Creechan.
Yes.
Representative Laflamme.
Yes.
Representative Partial.
Yes.
And I'm calling the roll on 265 ought to pass, which is,
You can't call on those two. They were not in the room.
The question was called.
all right.
Correct.
Chairman Vose.
Yes.
Okay.
Hmm?
19 yes, 0 opposed, and 3 absent.
Okay, by a vote of 19 to nothing, Senate Bill 265 is judged to be ought to pass
They're absent for the vote.
without,
Added two that are absent, which is 4.
Yeah, but one came in.
all right, have that discussion later. So without objection, we'll put this one on the consent calendar as well. Seeing no objection, So ordered. So we now have 4 bills on the consent calendar. The clerk is going to love us. That's great. Okay.
This clerk doesn't.
That's a different story. I closed the exec session on Senate Bill 265. And now I will resume the exec session on Senate Bill 321, and I'll recognize Representative Harrington for a motion.
Um, 20221641H.
Where is it?
I recognize Representative Thomas.
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded that we adopt
You got it.
Amendment 2022-1641H, which just came to us from Legislative Services. There are copies floating around the room. Please make sure everyone gets a copy.
I think it probably should.
There must be
Attorney
extra
General's
copies
office, make
floating
the-
around
make the
because
legal determination maybe, but
Kristen, I'm sure you obtained adequate copies. 30 copies. So there must be copies floating around. All right, so this amendment makes one change. On page 2, line 14, it changed what was the word commission to the word department to make sure that it's clear who administers this legislation. So is there any further discussion of the amendment? I'll remind members that the meat of the amendment is actually lines 13 through 25 of on page 1. That's the meat of the amendment. It adds 2 new sections to the legislation that sets up a condition of approval and the limits to the size and scope of projects. So those are the 2 changes that the amendment makes to the bill. And I'd like to know if there's any further discussion required. Well, seeing none, then I will call the question, and I ask the clerk to call the roll on the adoption of Amendment 2022-1641H.
Representative Thomas.
Yes.
Representative Harrington.
yes.
Representative Notter.
Yes.
Representative Murner.
Yes.
Representative Platt votes yes. Representative Berejny.
Yes.
Representative Bernardi.
Yes.
Representative Cambrils.
Yes.
Representative Ploget.
Yes.
Representative White.
Yes.
Representative Sumsich.
Yes.
Representative Kelly Pitts.
Yes.
Representative Mann. Representative Oxen's in absence.
No.
Oh, she showed up. Representative Lewicki.
Yes.
Representative Kelly.
Yes.
Representative McGee.
Yes.
Representative McWilliams.
Yes.
Representative Creechin.
Yes.
Representative Flam.
Yes.
Representative Paschal.
Yes.
And the chair.
Yes.
The vote is 22-0. All present and accounted for.
Okay, by a vote of 22-0, Amendment 1641H is adopted. And the chair now recognizes Representative Harrington for a motion.
I move that SB 321 as amended ought to pass.
And Representative Thomas.
Second.
That's what he said.
So it's been moved and seconded that SB 321 be judged ought to pass as amended by Amendment 1641H. Do we need any further discussion on this bill?
And that was seconded by Representative Thomas?
Thomas, yes. Any further discussion on this bill? Seeing none, I ask the clerk to call the roll on the question of ought to pass as amended for Senate Bill 321.
Representative Thomas,
Yes.
Representative Harrington.
Yes.
Representative Nodder,
Yes.
Representative Murner.
Yes.
Representative Platt votes yes. Representative Bereshny,
Yes.
Representative Bernardi,
Yes.
Representative Cambrils,
Yes.
Representative Ploget,
Yes.
Representative White,
Yes.
Representative Somsich,
Yes.
Representative Kelly Pitts,
Yes.
Representative Mann, Representative Oxenham,
Yes.
Representative Lewicki,
Yes.
Representative Kelly,
Yes.
Representative McGee,
Yes.
Representative McWilliams,
Yes.
Representative Creechin,
Yes.
Representative Laflamme,
Yes.
Representative Partial,
Yes.
and the chair.
Yes.
The vote is 22-0.
Okay, by a vote of 22-0, Senate Bill 321 is, the motion is adopted of ought to pass as amended. And without objection, we will put this one on the consent calendar as well. Seeing no objections, I think we have set a new ST&E record, at least for this session year, for a number of bills on the consent calendar. 5 out of, what was the number we had here today? 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8. 5 out of 8. Wow. That's amazing. Okay, thank you for that. So we'll close the exec session on Senate Bill 321. And that brings us to our final exec session, Senate Bill 448. And the chair recognizes Representative Bernardi for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move ITL.
Representative White.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded by Representatives Bernardi and White that Senate Bill 448 be judged to be ITL. Is there a discussion? Representative Bernardi.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This bill is premature. It has some writing difficulties in multiple places. It does not use the standard terminology that is used in the very first time explaining what the rationale should be or the characteristics should be for making decisions. Initially, it says they must be feasible, practical, and cost effective. In all the other places in the bill, it either leaves out practical or cost effective or makes some other commentary. So there's not a consistent methodology for making decisions and managing decisions. So it's the concept here is just premature.
Representative Partial.
I do believe that when the bill was presented by Senator Waters, he addressed that concern, and he thought that the language would be unnecessarily redundant should all those things appear every time. The fact that it appears once in the bill establishes the standard. And my concern with not passing this bill at this time is that we're charged with saving the citizens of New Hampshire money where we can. And this is a very cost-effective program to save the citizens a substantial amount of money, and I would like to do as much.
Further comment on this legislation, Representative Lewicki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wonder, one thing that doesn't seem to be addressed is the resale value of the vehicles or other assets. And it may be that we'll save money on operation and then lose it when we try to get rid of them at the end.
Representative Oxenham is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's my understanding that, excuse me, when I've taken bills to OLS in the past and there's been repetitive language, they have directed it to be removed and only the first word to be included. I believe that's standard regulatory law practice. We happen to have a lawyer in the room. We could ask Mr. Crease, I believe, whether in fact it is understood that cost-effective and the other word are also included by reference.
Okay, thank you. Further comments? Representative Somsich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up on Representative Lewicki's comment, if you look at vehicles that are now on the market that are hybrid vehicles or even EV vehicles, the resale value is higher than a regular vehicle would be these days. And it's not going to get any lower than that. The other thing is, you know, it used to be when I moved into the state 20 some years ago, or no, actually 30 years ago now, we used to be a frugal Yankee state. We would want to be really cheap with everything. We want to save as much money and energy as we can. And this bill is kind of directing the state agencies to do the same. I don't know why we shouldn't support that and find a way to say yes to it. Thank you.
Further comment, Representative Callie Pitts?
Not going for a Pulitzer Prize on this one. I do believe that what we are asking the agencies to do, some of which they have implemented, but I think we need to this puts it on a fast forward basis and gives us a better handle on what's being done and how it's being done. I remember the first projects that we had in here that were change the lighting, and that saved money. And yet when we started, oh, we can't do that. We can't make people change the light bulbs. Yes, we can. And I think that there's no problem with passing a bill like this that is going to make, in the end, the state more efficient. And that doesn't just include these buildings. It includes the buildings we also own in other areas. So I think that's really important. We may see what's going on here. We may see what's happening here, but we may not see what's happening in other buildings. And I think that this is going to give a report. They have to give a report to departments to say what's happening in their other locations. And I think that's very important, especially at this juncture with energy being, I believe, in a crisis mode right now.
Thank you. Further discussion, Representative Bernardi.
Well, I'll second the motion that energy is in a crisis mode here. We had the ISO folks tell us that we are at capacity on very, very cold winter days, and likely when we get very hot summer days. And we're adding by this program on an exponential rate a large number of electric vehicles, and we're not providing any capacity for generating the power for that. I think these things need to grow organically, and I hold to my original comments that despite the fact that the very first time feasible, practical, and cost-effective are mentioned, every section refers to different functions, different agencies doing different things, and those words need to be consistent throughout this legislation.
Thank you. Representative Berejny is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. During the hearings, I heard that the costs of electric vehicles in the infrastructure is going down. I don't think we need to be early adopters. We can wait a year or two, and the prices will be less.
Additional comments, Representative McGee.
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment on something that Representative Bernardi just said about the capacity on the grid. I actually was speaking with the ISO New England this morning and on those very issues, and we are not at capacity, and they are electrifying. And so, you know, if we actually want to go to the ISO or talk with the ISO more about what is real in terms of, you know, grid modernization and electrification and all that, and what the plans are, we should do that. But I didn't want it to remain in the record that we are at capacity when there are peaks. We may have to employ peaking plants for peak demand, but we do have adequate, we definitely have adequate. He said, in fact, the system is long, not short on energy. We have more energy than we need. And there is capacity planning going on. So we just shouldn't be saying things that we think, but we don't know.
So was that your regular breakfast conference call with ISO
It was
New
in the
England?
car on the way here, actually. It was a return from a call. from
Representative
yesterday.
Bernardi.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have regular breakfast calls with the ISO folks. I do recall earlier this year going to a session that they held for all of us where they gave a report that we are on the edge of having blackouts if we have rolling blackouts, if we have any kind of prolonged cold spell, and we just barely made it through this year. So that's on the record, that's published, that's not any telephone call.
Okay, further discussion, Representative Oxenham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand that we're going to be coming back to consider one of the bills that was on the agenda for today. I'd like to suggest that we take this bill and put it off to that same session so that we can clear up this minor technicality about the language and go forward with this bill. We are confronted with a crisis in the globe and here, and we have to do what we can with what we have. This is a bill that will allow us to do cost savings and save energy and save ratepayers money. Please let us go forward with it.
Representative Platt.
I just have to say, I used to have regular breakfast calls with ISO New England, but since retirement, I've been somewhat isolated.
Representative Harrington.
Yeah, well, Fred's back. There's no question about that. At least he's not speaking with a Spanish accent after his trip to Mexico. I expected his sombrero, but it's to follow up on that discussion. I mean, the letter's been out there by Gordon von Walde, who's the CEO of ISO New England. It's made it very clear we got close. We were very close to the edge. In fact, there was a day in January when I think we're down to about 300 megawatt surplus over going to blackout. So this is a real issue that needs to be dealt with. But as far as this bill goes, there is nothing at all, and I'd hope this would be without having to have legislation. There's nothing that stops any department in the state of New Hampshire from going out there and pursuing an economic way of obtaining their vehicles. And if it's going with electric and they feel that's the best way they can do it, there's nothing that stops them from doing that. They can use their own judgment on it. So everything does not have to be emanated by the legislature. We have some pretty smart people that work for the state, and they would figure it out what's the best way to go.
Further discussion, Representative Somsich.
Thank you very much. I just like to say that this bill actually is helping us if there is any kind of a backlog or a lack of energy. Reducing demand, reducing energy use is exactly what helps us, not harms us. So I don't see what connection there is.
Further discussion, Representative Oxenham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I have to say a lot on this one because I missed so much of the morning. On the EV issue, having a large stock of EVs acts as a battery. It can actually help us get through peaks. This is a cost-saving measure across the board, and I think we should have the same 21-0 vote on it that we had on the last bill.
I hope that gets you closer to your quota of words. Okay. Representative Callie Pitts.
I'd just like somebody to refresh my memory from the other party. I thought at one point the governor had said that this was what was going to happen, that the fleet was going to become electrified and that they were going to be replacing vehicles on that basis. Am I wrong on that?
You'd have to ask the governor, not. I can't speak for the governor.
You want to make a call?
Sure, go ahead.
I do believe I heard that from the governor.
Okay, further discussion. Okay, seeing none, I'd like to ask the clerk to call the roll on the question of ITL on Senate Bill 448.
Representative Thomas.
Yes.
Representative Harrington.
Yes.
Representative Nodder.
Yes.
Representative Murner.
Yes.
Representative Platt votes yes. Representative Berejny.
Yes.
Representative Bernardi.
Yes.
Representative Cambrils.
Yes.
Representative Ploget.
Yes.
Representative White.
Yes.
Representative Somsich.
No.
Representative Callie Pitts.
No.
Representative Mann. No. Representative Oxenham. Representative Lewicki.
Yes.
Representative Lewicki voted yes to confirm. Representative Kelly,
No.
Representative McGee,
No.
Representative McWilliams,
No.
Representative Creechin,
No.
Representative Laflamme,
No.
Representative Partial,
No.
and the chair.
Yes.
$12-10.
Okay, by a vote of 12 to 10, the committee adopts the resolution of ITL on Senate Bill 448. And will there be a minority report on this bill? And if so, who shall write it? Representative Creechin? Representative Creechin will write the minority report. And Representative, I'll remind you that it's due by noon tomorrow. Noon on Wednesday. Okay, so with that, we'll close the exec session on Senate Bill 448. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes our work for the day. And I appreciate it. I thank you all very much for your hard work. We got it done. And we got it done with 5 bills on the consent calendar. I'm still blown away by that. So thanks again, everyone. We'll see you next Tuesday at 10 o'clock for the resumption of the public hearing on Senate Bill 271. Thank you and good morning.